Following video is brought to you by BSEN, Boston Sports Entertainment Network. Please subscribe, hit that like button, and as always, leave a comment, and thank you for enjoying the video.
I got the Boston Celtics going to the Final Four. I got them winning the other.
It's time to represent your city. Put your hands up. Colin, you know we do it for Boston. Hey, ain't nobody ballin' like Boston. Yeah, hey. Can't nobody do it like Boston. Where the legends get made, where the banners get raised, bright lights, big stage. Boston. All the fire we bring in a city full of rings, it's a beautiful thing out in Boston. And you ain't hard like that. You don't put it on the line with your squad like that. That's right, Boston. All we do is win like cigars in the gym, and we at it again. I say, Beantown, what's up? What's up? 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 Feel the energy shift, now we jumping at the gym. Represent, showing out how we ball above the rim. Larry Legend, 86, to the truth in 08. Cement your name with the all-time greats. Still banner 18 in the rafters. Celtic green, only green that matters. It's about that time. Ain't another city that's louder than mine. Always gonna shine with the game on the line. What you think was gonna happen, man? That's how we do it in Boston. Ain't nobody gonna like Boston. Yeah. Ain't nobody do it like Boston.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Dynasty Proud podcast, episode 13. My name is Jason, that's Alex, and today we have a special guest, Justin Turpin from WEEI.com, who covers the Boston Celtics. Justin, thanks for being here.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me. And that intro is awesome. That's fire. Whoever put that together, great job.
Yeah, that's Rit, I believe, who put that together. He did a montage and all that, so it's pretty cool. So we want to get to our first topic, which is the overall state of the Boston Celtics, Justin, just heading into the postseason health-wise and how they played up to this point so far. What are your thoughts on their season so far?
I mean, it couldn't have gone any better, right? I mean, you're 60 wins already, and you've been relatively healthy for the whole season outside of a couple of injuries here and there. You've been pretty healthy the whole year. You've been blowing teams out nightly. You're top 5 in average margin of victory this season in NBA history. So it couldn't have gone any better than what we've seen. So, I mean, you got to be happy if you're a Celtics fan. They've given you every reason to believe this is their year. I mean, everything that we've seen in the past that we've been kind of harping on seems to be corrected, right? Like playing down to opponents, like all that stuff, even the clutch. I mean, I know we'll get into that, but that's even been improved a little bit. So I think it all goes back to that word mindset that Joe Mazzulla brought up at the beginning of the year, and they've stuck with it, and they've done a great job staying with that philosophy and really building on that. And it's led to a terrific year.
I think another big thing as well is a lot of people online and in the media act like every single year the Celtics are.
Oh, did we lose him?
Think so. StreamYard, it happens all the time.
I gotta add him back.
I get it.
There we go.
Happy to be back. But more so that, like, we haven't won 60 games in over 15 years. We haven't been the 1 seed since Tatum's rookie year. So, like, this isn't an every year thing. Like, people should appreciate how special this team is. And like Justin said, like, we've been pretty lucky health-wise, knock on wood. And we're at this point where we can manage health down the stretch. We're not fighting, tooth and nail to win every game and, like, having to play guys big minutes just for seeding. Like, we can ease our way into the playoffs. So it's just a balance of rest versus rust at this point, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah, 100%. And that's going to be the biggest issue moving forward, right? You got like 3 weeks remaining in the season. So it's going to be, how do you rest these guys without messing with the flow that you've been building all year, this chemistry that you've been building all year? Because once you start playing guys with different people, different rotations, it kind of messes things up a little bit. So it's a matter of staying fresh for the postseason, but also building on what you've been doing. So that's really the only tough line the Celtics have to walk over these next 6 games, where they've already accomplished everything they need to do. They don't need to accomplish anything else in the regular season. They've proved everything. They can't move up or down. Only thing you want to see is that win total keep going up, because you can see it, with all these all-time great teams. But the biggest responsibility right now is just staying healthy and making sure that you don't disrupt that flow, that chemistry, and that connectivity that you've been building all season.
So just a quick question. Do you think the remaining games left, do you think we're going to see a lot more of the starters just take more rest and kind of get geared up for the playoffs coming up?
I think you'll see them staggered. I think there's no way that we see any starter play all of the next 6. I could say that pretty confidently. It just doesn't make sense, but they are going to play. I mean, it's funny because people have been joking on social media and whatever all year. Let's throw Kristaps Porzingis in bubble wrap until June. They've been saying it all year, and the Celtics really they could if they want to, but it wouldn't be the best point of action. So for them, you're going to see the starters resting, and that's natural, especially at this point of the season. But very rarely are teams 12 games above the next team in the conference at this point of the season. It's absolutely insane. So they have a luxury right now. And so far, I think they've done a really good job of balancing what, continuing the reps, like I was just talking about, in health. And that's just going to continue to be the biggest thing. But I think we will see the starters really staggered across the remaining 6 games. And it's funny because we only seen the starting 5 together for 36 games. That's crazy to think about, that the starting 5 has only been together for 36 games, and they're 28-8 in those games. So like, we haven't even seen this lineup at its full potential. So I think in the postseason, we're going to really see these guys bust out some stuff that we haven't seen yet. It's going to be exciting.
And that's why I think the ceiling could be even higher for this team, which is scary for the rest of the league, particularly the East. So it's like, of these games remaining, like, I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see everybody play all 6 games. We don't necessarily put them in bubble wrap and run out the main Celtics out there. But I would say the Milwaukee game, like, because that's the only remaining road game. Like, if it wasn't a nationally televised game, just keep everybody in Boston and you can run them out there for that game. But it depends if Wick wants to pay the fine of not having, multiple stars play in that game. But like, I think it might be even more like the first Milwaukee game, minus being down by 40, where it's like, you play like, if you have to play him, it's like less minutes and it's a lot more of the bench in that game. But like, that's the only remaining road game we have, honestly, for a few weeks. Cause like, even we have a week layoff after the season, and then we'll have the first 2 games at home. So you get a lot of rest and recovery at home.
I would say too, when you're looking at the remaining 6 games, you got Sacramento that's still fighting for the play-in. You've got Milwaukee obviously still trying to stay up top, which they already pretty much clinched the 2 seed, but they're still playing. They're trying to figure themselves out. And you've got New York, who just lost Julius Randle and still fighting to stay above, because the middle pack of the East is really tough. So I think those 3 games you look at, it's like, all right, these teams are going to give you a challenge because these teams are still fighting for something, as opposed to like Charlotte and Washington. Like when you play those teams, that's when you can kind of lessen off. So I think if you're going to stagger and you want to see the starting lineup, you do it against teams like Milwaukee or New York. Obviously, they're not doing it tonight, and it makes sense with Sacramento and Jaylen Brown's injury. You don't want to push it, but there's obvious games where the team's going to give you more of a push and you can simulate more of a postseason atmosphere. I guess at this point, simulate is used weekly, right? Because it's at the end of the season. But I think there are natural breaks and stuff in the schedule where you can be like, all right, we can roll out, like you said, like the main Celtics tonight, right? We can roll out these teams against like Charlotte and Washington, but there's times that they know, and they have a whole department for that stuff, right? It's not like Joe Mazzulla is the one deciding like, all right, you're going to sit tonight. Like they have a whole health and science department that deals with all that, and they chart all that, and that's way beyond any of our knowledge, and they do a great job with that. So, I mean, just staying healthy is obviously the main concern.
So speaking of Jaylen Brown, you mentioned his injury. So obviously he has like a sprain, I guess, to a ligament in his wrist. I was watching NBC Sports Boston there, and Eddie House was saying that teams in the playoffs, they're probably going to go after his hand, hit it, play more physical. Do you think this injury has any impact on his, running the playoffs and his play moving forward?
I don't, and I'm not a doctor, but the way I kind of hear it and the way I'm like kind of perceiving it is that this is more of a tolerance thing and a pain thing than it is it can get worse. And Jaylen, talking about it the other night, said he had some discomfort, but it was his first game back. So now looking forward, like we got 3 weeks until the playoffs. That's 3 weeks for him to rest up. Yeah. And like I said, he's probably going to play in between then. But given the time frame between now and the playoffs, I really don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. It is funny though, because like this is the second year in a row that Celtics are going into the postseason, and Jaylen Brown's got some weird injury with his hand. Like last year, it was watering plants at his house, and he cut open his hand. Like remember, he had like a laceration in his hand from watering plants. Like now we're going into the playoffs this year, and we got another injury on hands with Jaylen Brown. So I don't know. I think given the time between now and the playoffs, it shouldn't be a concern. But obviously, like we just talked about, like the health has been a strength of this team so far, and Jaylen Brown really hasn't missed many games. And now an injury pops up. It's just unfortunate that's happening at this time. But I think every time around this postseason, you see any kind of injury, it kind of raises some eyebrows. But given how much time they've got between now and then, I don't think it's a concern moving forward.
So it's funny that it's his left hand, which all NBA fans says he doesn't have anyway. So it really shouldn't be a cause for concern. But it's I feel like he's beat those allegations all year with his play, and like he's been finishing a lot with his left hand and then holding it out, right after he makes
I love
it.
that.
So it's unfortunate that he's going to have another left hand injury, and maybe that is something that we can monitor going forward. Fortunately, we're in the position where we can rest him. We're going to have the time, not just the end of the season, but the additional week off until the playoffs. So if he's just a pain tolerance thing, that should give him time for recovery. And I think that actually leads into my next question, which would be potential first round opponents. Who would you want to see? Who would you want to avoid? And I think for me, just off the bat, it's like, as Jason was saying, and you were saying, like, they may go at that left hand. Like, you think of someone like Miami that always seems to be in the wrong place at the wrong time as far as like landing areas and, taking charges. And it's like, I feel like a team like that would definitely go at his left hand, like, not even try to get the ball, but like, because they know they can kind of get to him that way. So what are your thoughts on potential first round opponents and who you'd like to see and who you might potentially want to avoid, if anybody?
I want to see Miami, and that's the team I want to see. I think looking back to the 2022 NBA Finals run, everyone was running from Brooklyn, right? Nobody wanted to play Brooklyn. The Celtics embraced it, and Ime Udoka even said, "We're not a track team. We're not running from everybody. Like we're going to take on whoever," and that's what they did. And I think that's what the Celtics will do this year. Obviously, they can't control who they see because they're locked in at the 1 seed, but Miami would right away raise their alertness. Like this is a test right away. Like, you got to be ready to go. Like they're going to want it. It's going to motivate them. And honestly, if you're the Celtics, right, and we're talking about avoiding a first round opponent, we got bigger problems, right? Then they're not ready to win a championship if we're talking about avoiding a first round opponent. So reality is whoever they see, they should handily take care of easily. But I want to see Miami first. I think it raises the alertness right away. It gets them, it really will test their mindset, right? That's been the pillar of their success all year. It's like, all right, these guys are like your boogeymen, right? You guys have this rivalry. And the Celtics this year have given you no reason to believe they couldn't beat Miami. Outside of that big blowout game, I think in mid-January when the Celtics won by 35, they've been close, but Miami has no answer for Kristaps Porzingis. And that zone that they used to kill the Celtics with, it's completely irrelevant because what did Brad Stevens do in the offseason? He brought in one of the best zone busters in the league in Kristaps Porzingis. So they have no answers for them. And I think Miami, like I said, just sets the tone right from the start and would really is the one I want to see.
So I'm not going to
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm not going to lie. I was always for the Field versus Miami first round, just because every time the Celtics play Miami, it's always like it's close. It always goes 7 games, and God forbid we lose in the first round. It would be an absolute mess. But you just convinced me. Honestly,
I love it.
I like the Ime Udoka comparison about we're not a track team and all that. So I agree. I think Miami now, you get them out of the way. You show the rest of the East that we mean business and we go.
I want Miami so bad for numerous amounts of reasons. One, living in Miami amongst that fan base. Ask them to give you an actual basketball argument why they can beat this year's Celtics team. And every argument is, living in the past. That's what you said last year, playoff Jimmy. Like, I want them so bad just to eliminate that right away. And I think it would be good for the team as well. As you referenced, the 22 Nets series, like they were up and they were ready for that. Like getting an opponent like Miami or even like a Philly in the first round with Embiid playing, it's going to raise their alertness level. I think they're going to bring their A game from the jump. You get a team like Atlanta or Chicago, maybe not Atlanta now just because of what happened recently, but like even Indiana or Chicago in the first round, I feel like it could end up being like last year's first round. I mean, maybe this team's more mature and they see the eyes on the prize and they don't let it happen, but natural complacency, like you're just getting up big on these teams that don't have the talent to hang with you on the floor, and they may get complacent, let a team back in the game, and then things start to snowball. Maybe you play an extra game or two. Like, I honestly think they would sweep the Heat. I really do. And I think they would want that series. And I think last year getting Atlanta instead of Miami, I think we get Miami round 1, we finish that series quickly. Maybe last year's team wasn't as serious and mature, so maybe not. But I think I want a team like Miami that's going to get them going from the jump. And, knock on wood, we can avoid injuries because that always seems to find its way with the Heat. But from a basketball perspective, that's the team and the opponent I want first.
And I think you nailed it, Alex, when you said the complacency, right? That's kind of naturally going to settle in when you're talking about playing like the Chicago Bulls. If they somehow make it out of the play-in, like it's kind of an extension of the regular season at that point, right? Because this is a team you're going to win, you're going to beat in a series, so you're going to kind of keep easing off. You're not going to like exert all your energy. You're going to keep experimenting, and that's just the natural complacency. That's human nature, right? Like we saw that last year with Atlanta. That series should not have gone 6 games. But they kind of took their foot off the gas at times. And I think that is something the Celtics have fixed this year. That's a wrong they have righted this year. And it goes back to that mindset. And we literally hear that word all the time. Like I might have to start keeping tallies at press conferences, like how many times they say that word, because it's repetitive. Like it's ingrained in my mind at this point, but it works. It's the philosophy that which they've built their success this year, and it's worked great. So looking forward to like the postseason, like I said, give me Miami right away and let's set the alertness. Let's set the tone and be ready to go.
I'll be there, and I'm going to bring my makeshift broom to Game 4 if we're up 3-0.
I love it. I love it.
I want them so bad. Speaking of the playoffs, though, we heard before the season going in, like the Celtics, like, yeah, they may have the best starting 5 or they're very top heavy, but the bench is going to be such a point of weakness. And, we have no one on the bench and we're going to burn out our guys, basically like Tibbs is our coach. Throughout the regular season. And that hasn't happened because of the elevation of play from Peyton Pritchard, from Sam Hauser, even from Luke Cornett, who's been a revelation off the bench as well. So my question to you is, going into the playoffs, obviously you're going to see a heavier dose of minutes from the starters in Al than you would get in the regular season. But like, what role do you think Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, Luke Cornett, maybe even sparing Tillman minutes, was going to play in the playoffs? And how do you think that's going to affect the series? And do you think it's matchup dependent, opponent dependent?
I think in terms of the big men, it'll be matchup and opponent dependent. But I think Luke and Xavier Tillman will switch off in that sense. But in terms of Hauser and Pritchard, those guys are in the rotation, and you're going to see minutes from these guys. And they've given you no reason to believe that they can't swing a postseason game. Look, the playoffs is long, right? It's an extension. Like it's a season in itself. So there's going to be games where the starters just aren't going to show up. That's natural. And the bench is going to have to win them a game. And looking at Pritchard and Hauser and even Al, I know everyone kind of lumps in the Celtics don't have a top starting 5. They have a starting 6. Like everyone, no, I feel like no one considered Al Horford is on the bench, right? It's the bench is, like you said, Hauser, Cornett, Pritchard, Tillman. Like you're going to see those guys. And they've given you every reason to believe that they can swing a game in the Celtics' favor. They've been doing it all year, especially over this last month. Like we've seen, like Pritchard is a legitimate playmaker, and he's taken a big leap in that department this year. And like that was something like he never really had the chance to. And people forget, like Peyton Pritchard was in that NBA Finals 2022 run. He was in that rotation. Like he was playing. Like he's been there. It's not like he's new to this. So I believe in this bench. I've been a big believer in them all year. I think it just comes with kind of increased perspective. Like Delano Banton. Like he leaves Boston, gets increased minutes in Portland, and look what he's doing. Like the talent level in the NBA is just, it's phenomenal. And when these guys get their chances, they don't let it down. And we're seeing that with the Celtics bench, and they've proven that they can swing a game, and everyone should be confident in them. I really don't understand the slight on the bench. Like people just hate Luke Cornett. Like I don't get it. Like the guy is steady and he does his job, but people are like, yeah, like come on, that's great. He's a great locker room guy too.
Great
vibes
vibes guy.
People are like, yeah, he's like, he sucks. Like why? Like he does all the little things. He might like none of them like on a given night might not pack the box score, right? And they don't have to, but like in terms of impactfulness, like their net rating leads the league, their plus minus leads the league, and they do all the little things. Like whenever they needed a spark off the bench, they bring it. So this bench is proven, and now I'm confident in them going into the postseason.
Yeah, so sorry, go ahead, Jason.
No, I was just gonna say it was funny because me and Alex were talking at the trade deadline, and we were like talking about people that they could bring in. But at the same time, we were like, well, Peyton's having a big year. Luke is playing good defense, and then Sam shooting the lights out of the ball. And it was like, we don't really need any help. We got our help is from the bench. Like they're playing like really good basketball this year. So it was like, we don't need like a Lonnie Walker or Corey Kispert, even though like it would be nice for like extra depth, but like we didn't really need it this year.
And the reality is whoever they were going to bring in at the deadline knew they weren't going to play. And same thing with the 15th man roster spot that they haven't filled. Like whoever they bring in is not going to play. Like the rotation's going to naturally go to 8 or 9 tops. It's typically 8, especially with this team. Like they knew their rotation. So like you were bringing in a depth piece, if anything. And that's what they did with Tillman. They bring in a big that can space the floor. He needs to start hitting that corner 3 though, because if he's not making that corner 3, he's not as effective a spacer, then he's going to be tough to find minutes. And he's shown that he can do it. Like watching him warm up, like he has a nice stroke. It's just a matter of knocking those down when it matters, because if he's not hitting that corner 3, his offensive game takes a big hit because they're leaving him open there and he's not necessarily spacing now. So he needs to hit that. But I think going in, like they knew what the rotation was, and they weren't going to just get somebody just to get a name. Like they already did that. The Celtics made their trade addition before the season. They did it on the eve of training camp when they brought in Drew Holiday. That was it. And looking forward, like if they are to add a 15th man, like it's not going to be anyone that's going to play. Like this is it. Like the guys they have are the guys they have, and they've given you every reason to believe that they have enough to win a championship.
And that's what people need to understand as well, is like everyone's like, oh, well, you know, even during the season, people that only box score watch and they'll look and they'll only see like, oh, well, this, you know, player X only had 2 or 4 points. Like, oh, well, they don't have a bench. It's like a playoff rotation is 8 or 9. For some teams, it's even smaller than that. So you don't need, 12 guys. You're not going to have 12 guys that are going to play even minutes. It doesn't work that way. And to reference something Brian Scalabrine said when he was talking about, like, when people would hate on him and that they always wanted to play him one-on-one and he would, bust their ass. He's like, I'm closer to LeBron than you are to me. Like, the talent level in the NBA is crazy. And just looking at these players like Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, like, the confidence that they're playing with this year, and especially Hauser, like so many people see him and like to be transparent, it's like, oh, it's a white guy that can shoot, he can't play defense. He holds his own on the defensive end. Like he's a big body, like he goes hard, and like when he's shooting with confidence, like he's gonna get left open because if he's on the floor with the spacing that the whole team has, like you can't double team him. What are you gonna leave Tatum open? You're gonna leave Porzingis open, Drew open. Like there's just so many weapons, and then you have guys like Pritchard and Hauser that can space the floor as well. It's almost like good luck, pick your poison. The only concern with Pritchard is I remember, a couple times in the playoffs against the Heat last year, they found a way to switch him on to Jimmy Butler, and like he would just abuse that matchup. So that's the only concern with anybody on the roster. Be like Pritchard, as much as you might try in the defensive end, he's gonna obviously have his liabilities due to his size. But like the energy he brings, the intensity he brings, like the sparkle off the bench, just like it's hard to find something to complain about, even if you're looking with this team.
And I think in general, both of them are terrific two-way players. Even Pritchard, I know he's an undersized guard, but like he does a good job defensively. And like another part of his game that's really been highlighted this year is his ability to offensive rebound. And that's huge in the postseason. That's huge. Like Joe Mazzulla always talks about those margins, right? Like, are you getting more shots up? Are you getting more free throws, more threes? The game is defined in the margins. And it's right. It's just simple basketball math. Like it or not, the game is trending in that way. Like I know everyone, especially in terms of baseball now, everyone's like, oh, analytics are ruining the game. Like, no, they're just opening up another kind of side of things. And it's another viewpoint that we didn't have a couple of years ago because it's really starting to take off now. And Joe Mazzulla likes numbers. He likes the analytics, and it makes sense. And like guys like Pritchard and Hauser dominate in those areas because they're both good rebounders. They both obviously are known for their shooting abilities, and they're great defenders. Like they are good defenders. And even though like Pritchard's a little smaller, like Joe Mazzulla has been praising Sam Hauser's defense all year because he's been really good. And like there really is just no holes on this team, like up and down. When you look at it, like the top 6 is unmatched. Like this might be the best top 6 we've ever seen in the NBA. And then you got those guys complimenting it. Like there's just no holes. And that's just a credit to what Brad Stevens has built. Cause the word super team is thrown out a lot, but like this is a super team. Like they are that good.
So I just have a question. You mentioned Joe Mazzulla. So a lot of people on Twitter have been just going after, remember last year in the playoffs, right? His clock management and timeout stuff was kind of not ideal. And he was a first year coach anyway, and he came into a rough situation last year anyway. So obviously, it was tough for him in that aspect. But do you worry about his game management in the playoffs this year, compared to last year?
I don't. I think he's taken a big stride in that area this year. And you referenced the situation he was thrown into. Like, I understand, like, you're 34 years old. That's really young for an NBA head coach. You're thrown in like the week of training camp. And more importantly, he took over a depleted staff. right? Because a lot of Ime's guys left. So, and then midway through in March, Mighty Mouse, Damon Stoudemire leaves.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought he was the best candidate to be the head coach because he had the most experience. So you're taking over a depleted staff and you kind of expect everything to go fluidly. It's just not the case. And now you have Charles Lee and Sam Cassell on your bench. You got Emil Jefferson. Like, they completely revamped that coaching staff. And Joe just seems more comfortable because he has his guys. He's had a whole offseason to implement his philosophies and how he wants to do things. And it's worked out for them. And in terms of, like you said, like the X's and O's part of it, like the clock management, that like he's shown significant growth in that area. And like, he's one of the best out of the timeouts. I forget who had it. I wish I had the name of the author, but they did a great job. And it was showing like best points per possession out of the timeouts. And Joe Mazzulla was up there as the top. Like, that's one of the biggest parts of people criticizing coaching. It's like, what the plays are you going to outside after a timeout? So he's been great with that. And I think he's just taken a leap in general, like in total everywhere. So I don't have any doubt in Joe going into the postseason, especially with the revamped coaching staff behind him.
No, I completely agree. Like, the revamped coaching staff is a big thing that goes overlooked by many people this year. Like, bringing in a veteran like Sam Cassell, especially a former player that can relate, that someone that has that experience on the sideline, bringing in Charles Lee, hopefully he stays around, because I know he may interview for the Charlotte job. Having Emil Jefferson, even having Brad Stevens with his coaching history to lean on as well. Like,
and Gundy as well.
All that support around him. And plus the experience of he's been through it now, in the playoffs. He's been through 2 seasons now. Like, he kind of knows the ups and downs. And like, yeah, he was trying things out. And he even says like he's trying out different lineups now to see what will work. Like, he's experimenting with like the timeouts. Everyone likes to get on about timeouts, but like, these players are more mature. They're veterans. Like, you can't look for the coach to bail you out every single time someone goes on like a 4 or 5-0 run. Like, you're going to have to be able to do it yourself. Cause like, that's part of growing up as well. And maturing as a player is like, okay, like, look, we can't just go through the motions until coach calls a timeout. Like, we have to figure this out for ourselves. Cause there's going to be big moments in the playoffs where they need to step up. So I like that a lot as well. Like, the other thing people question is like, late game clock management, but a lot of that is on the players. Like, to make the right decisions. Like, Joe may draw up a play for, people to get going, and then Tatum just sees a mismatch or tries to like work an angle. Like, I would like him to not dribble the ball for the first 16 seconds and then make the move late. But like, I think there's a lot that goes into it, and I'm very confident in Joe, down the stretch. And then you look at the East, like, other than Spo, what coach are you really confident in that's like, is going to be out coached them? Like Doc Rivers, like, historically, when has that ever been the case in the playoffs? Even Nick Nurse, like, yeah, but like, you look at that team that they have right now, like, that Embiid's going to be gassed, like, in playoff type of atmosphere, like, after sitting out for so long. So I feel confident in Joe. I feel confident in the staff. I feel confident in this team and these players. I just can't wait for it to get going for the real games to start.
Right. And when you're looking at the Eastern Conference, like, I think you nailed it. Like, I think Celtics are head and shoulders above the Eastern Conference. It's what's going to happen once you get there. And obviously it's easier said than done to get to the NBA finals. Like, that's why there was what, like a 15-year gap between the Celtics doing it or whatever, like with 2022, like it took that long because it's hard to do. So it's not like this is going to be handed to them. It's not like they're just going to march through the postseason. Like, there are going to be natural ups and downs. It's how they work through those. But in terms of like being out coached, like, you got to worry about Denver, I think, with Mike Malone, and that's really it. Like, I just don't think the Miami Heat have it this year. Like, that was a great run, and like, you never count them out. Let's be clear, you never count the Miami Heat out, because they will sleepwalk through the regular season, and then all of a sudden it's postseason, and here we go. Let's turn it up. Like, they lost in the play-in last year, and that's how they got the 8 seed. Go in, beat Milwaukee, and granted it was without Giannis, and then beat the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. So you can't count those guys out. But I just think like people are really hard on Joe, and for whatever reason, I think, well, because the talent of the team, but like, let's not act like Ime never had blown leads or Ime never made miscues down the stretch. Like, it happens with every coach. It's just more, it's for whatever reason, it's been more highlighted with Joe, which is interesting to me considering the guy's won 71% of the games he's coached. And like, he gets all this hate. Like, I don't understand it. And I guess like it's a perk, and it's also a downfall of having such a talented roster.
I think the big thing with him is like, he's almost in like a thankless position. It's like, because of the talent of the roster, it's like he'll get, if this team doesn't win, it's clearly his fault. He wasn't ready. He wasn't the right coach. But if they do win, like I think he was the fastest coach ever to 100 wins. It's like, well, of course he won. Look at the roster he was given. So it's like, it's kind of hard for him to win in that sense. But I feel very confident in him to make the right decisions. I love his kind of attitude towards coaching and toward like he's not soft. Like he's like everyone looks at like Ime Udoka, like he was this drill sergeant, and then Joe's this like nice happy guys like go team. But like he's really hard on them. And like just the way he coaches, like I have utmost confidence in him. And at the end of the day, it's about the players. Like you can drop the perfect schemes, but it's up to the players to execute it. And I feel like we have the veterans now. We have the experience to make it happen and get it done. And like you referenced Miami, it's like, you can't count them out. If you give them an opportunity to win that game, they will go win that game. They have the guys to do it. But if you put their foot in their throats, you're more talented than them. This is a more veteran team. Like we didn't have Porzingis against them last year. And that's such a mismatch from these games. Like, you throw it into him at the top of the key. He can see over the defense. If you don't double team him, he'll shoot right over, or he'll, back you down. You do double him, we can space the floor all the way around. Like, I feel like he was brought in specifically to beat Miami. Like, I don't think with Porzingis healthy, especially get him in the first round when like it's almost guaranteed Porzingis will be healthy. Knock on wood. After the Heat series, he remains that way. But like, I just don't think they can beat this team, especially not 4 out of 7. Like, yeah, there might be one game where things don't go our way, and then Jimmy Butler turns it on, but I just can't see that team winning more than like one game against us.
And you look at the Celtics, like they have not lost back-to-back. What's it? 3 times, 4 times? Forget the number off the top of my head. They don't lose back-to-back games. So when you're looking at it that way, it's like, how is anyone going to beat this team in 7, especially in the Eastern Conference, who they've just marched through? Like I said, like I think it's a consensus pick that everyone's got them representing the Eastern Conference. I think everyone's got them going to the finals. It's just a matter of beating Denver. And Denver can't be overlooked. Like Denver's a really good team as well. But to your point, like with Kristaps Porzingis, like people call him a cheat code, and it's fitting. Anytime they need a bucket, anytime they need something to get the offense going, they just dump it to him right at the nail and let him go to work. And it's a cop out. It's the easiest thing. It's literally a cheat code to jumpstart your offense. And one of the more like, it's been glaringly obvious at different points throughout the season. One of that really sticks out to me, though, is when they played Detroit in December, and they were trailing by like 17 at the half. And this was when Detroit was on the losing streak. I think they tied the record that night at TD Garden. And the third quarter, they just kept feeding Porzingis right at the free throw line. Just get it to him right at the nail. And they come back and win it. Like that's how dangerous they are. And like I said earlier, like I don't think they've tapped into their full arsenal yet. I think they are still workshopping stuff, and they've seen bits and pieces of it, but we're going to see a lot more of their offense, and we're going to see a lot more involvement from him, especially in the clutch. I think like they've learned now, like you talked about earlier, like in the Atlanta games, like we're counting dribbles. When we're counting dribbles, like it's never going to be a good sign for the Celtics. Like we should never be counting dribbles, because when they slow down, it just doesn't work. And you watch back at I think it was the second Atlanta game, they go 5 out, and then Jalen takes or that was the first one when Jalen took the step back 3, like everyone's 5 out. There was really no motion, right? So we got to like looking forward, like we got to anticipate some more bells and whistles will be incorporated.
I think one final thought on this, a big thing for the playoffs is I think they've learned from experience, like, and that's why I want Miami first, so they come out of the gate firing and motivated and locked in. Is like stop playing with your food, not even only for the chance to lose a series, but like the extending of the series. Those are added games, those are added minutes, added fatigue, added risk of injury. The thing, they finally got to the finals. They're playing Golden State. Yeah, Golden State had the experience and we were inexperienced, but also Golden State's run, they took care of business the whole way. Now, granted, they faced a lot of injured teams, so they kind of had the benefit of the draw that way. But like we extended series longer than they needed to go. We had 2 7-game series leading into it, and I think Tatum and the team in general was just gassed by the time they got there. So if you can end series in 4 or 5 games throughout the East, maybe you don't even have to have all that adversity to like even let it come down to the end. But you're not adding minutes, you're not adding bumps and bruises and potential injuries. So when you face a Denver that may have a more grueling route in the West to get there, then maybe they're playing 6 and 7 game series the last few rounds to get there. Whereas like we're going 5 games most rounds, like we're rested and we're ready to go, and we're not exhausted by the time we get there. That can make a huge difference as well.
And that's a great point, because remember what word we kept hearing after that finals run in 2022? Fatigue. That was the key word. That was the buzzword. They kept referencing fatigue. We were tired. We were fatigued. And that's because they went to 2 7-game series before then. Like, yeah, they swept Brooklyn, and then they made things difficult for themselves. And I also think, like, to get to the top, you have to have some failure. And the Celtics have been there now. I think their last step was that 2022 finals loss. And that was a dynasty. Like that was a dynasty. They won 5 championships together, 4 or 5 championships together. That Golden State team, like 4. Yeah. And like, that's a dynasty. Like what they did is like, they're unprecedented. Like we don't see it much. Right. And so I think you run into that buzzsaw and like, of course, like they've been there. They have the mental toughness of being there. They understand what's going on being there. So I think that was just kind of one that Celtics like, that's a learning experience. And I think they have learned from it. And I think they're really starting to apply lessons from the past into this season.
So I do have one last question before we wrap it up, and that's the extensions for Drew Holiday and Derek White. So obviously, I believe Derek White is up after this year, I believe, right? Or is he?
Yeah, they have to wait till the off season.
And then Drew Holiday, right? He's eligible?
He's eligible as of April 1st, so he's eligible now.
So I guess my question to you is, do you think they're able to sign both? Probably, I'm assuming after the offseason. Or do you think they have to pick one and let the other one walk?
Well, I'll start by saying this. I mean, for all the praise that we give Brad Stevens, I think this is the only knock I have on him is he should have had that Derek White extension done this offseason. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like now you waited on it and his value has just skyrocketed. So I think the only way they do it is if they're both willing to take less money to stay. And I can't speak to it. And I think like Drew Holiday at this point of his career might be willing to. Like he's got a family, he's got kids, he's gotten older in his career now. He might be willing to do it. And they might be willing to do it to keep winning. It's like when you have that winning culture and you know that like you guys are going to be in this for the next decade. If you stay here, you guys are going to be competing for the next decade. Like that's enticing, and that could make players want to stay. So I wouldn't rule out the fact that they get both done. It's just going to be really difficult. And then also we'll see what happens with Al Horford. Yeah. Like, cause that'll be money on the books there with Al Horford. So we'll see what happens there, but I don't rule out both of them coming back, but it would have made me feel a hell of a lot better if that was done this offseason. Like I kept refreshing everything that day up when the extension deadline came. I was like, please just get it done now because his value is just skyrocketed. Like, remember at the beginning of the year, and this means nothing, but he was left off that ESPN top 100 list, which means absolutely nothing. But like, he's one of the most elite two-way guards in the league. And I don't think anyone would fight back against that.
I think Derek White, he's so invaluable to this team on both ends of the floor to everything the Celtics do. And he's spoken nothing but praise about how much he loves the experience in Boston, how much he loves being a Celtic. He's such a humble guy. He's someone that I would love to have here long term, and I think they both would like it to happen. Obviously, the number has gone up there. He's going to want his value. I think him and Drew are at different points in their career as well. So for Drew Holiday, you can see how upset he was about the trade, about the manner in which it happens. Obviously, the Bucks don't get the criticism because they're not the Celtics. If the Celtics did that, it's another situation of the Celtics doing players dirty, whereas the Bucks is a business decision. But I think Drew Holiday, it might be similar to an Al Horford situation, obviously with higher money than Al's getting now. But it's like he's at the point of his career. He's already won his title. He's on a championship level team. He already says like I think he only has like he's gonna only play a few more years. Like I don't think he's going after top dollar to go play in Chicago or go play in Charlotte. Like he wants to win. He likes the team he's on. Like as long as he's on this team, I mean, not necessarily him in particular, but like for him being on this team, they're going to be a contender every year, regardless, you know, even if they lose early and they like reload versus like rebuild, like they're still going to have like a championship contender level team. Like I think at this point in his career, he's comfortable where he's at. He's got his family moved to Boston now. Like I think that does get done. I think a la Porzingis, where it's like, it'll be an extension. He'll take a little bit less money for more years for the, you know, the safety net. For Derek White, I think he would like to stay here. I think the team wants him. It's about finding a comfortable number. I think, as you mentioned, the disrespect of not being on the top 100, you know, kind of getting left off the All-Star game. You know, people look at like, well, his stats versus this stats, but it's like his value towards winning, you know, what he provides. I think all that's been added motivation in like a contract year, so to speak. It may have elevated his play even more. Like, I don't think Derek White is someone that like, oh, well, you know, because I have a contract up now, I'm going to play harder. Like, he's always that player. But, like, the growth in his game has elevated this team to another level. Like you said, Porzingis is a cheat code, but, like, the level that we get from Derek White right now, this was not the Derek White we had in the finals 2 years ago. And even last year, like, obviously his stature started, you know, gaining notoriety more after that tip-in against Miami in Game 6. And then he was our best player in Game 7. Like, you know, everyone says we got blown out, but, like, we had it down to single digits at the end of the third, and it was Derek White leading the way. So I think this team, with this starting five, like we could keep this group together for the next several years. Like Porzingis is already extended, Jaylen Brown's extended, Tatum will be extended this summer. So it's like, especially if they win the championship, you can keep this whole team intact. Wick said for 6 years, but at least for the next like 2 to 3 minimum, you can have this exact team. There's no reason we can't win 2 titles in 3 years or 3 and 4 with this team, like optimistically looking at it.
Yeah, and I like how you referenced the Wick quote there, right? Because he views this as a multi-year window. And in that window, if you view this as a championship window, right, you're not going to be afraid to spend. And he hasn't been afraid to spend really since he took over the Celtics. He hasn't been afraid. He's been going all in for a championship, and they really pushed their chips into the middle of the table this year, and they have a chance to keep this together. And I don't think there's any reason to believe that Wick wouldn't do anything in his power within league rules with the new CBA to keep everyone together. And I think they are going to be here to stay. And this is the beginning of a multi-year window. Like, people are fiending for the next dynasty, right? And that this team really has the chance to do it.
And we're filming, I think it's like we're filming a documentary throughout the season, like where you had
Right.
Michael Jordan Last Dance. This might be like the first dance of the new legacy, and how thankful, not only the talent that we have in this team, but like from the top level down, like the Wick and ownership that are willing to spend and invest in this team. Brad Stevens, the mind that he is, like just all the brilliance and moves he's made, and the players that we have. Like, you look at what's going on with the Red Sox right now. You look at what's going on with the Patriots and like kind of the ineptitude and like lack of ownership to like care or spend. And it's like, you have no question about that from the Celtics, like that they're invested in this team and they want to win. So, as a Boston sports fan, but as a Celtics fan first, like, I'm just very thankful for like how well run this organization is. And I trust them to make the right decisions going forward for the team.
It really is from top to bottom, just well run. Like they set the precedent. Like this is how you want your team to be ran. Like, your ownership's not afraid to spend. You have a brilliant front office, and you got excellent talent on the court. Like, this is how you want your organization to be run. It's a top class organization. And for years, like you said, like the Red Sox were like that. The Patriots were like that, but the Patriots might have had a couple loopholes there with Tom Brady, but that's a topic for another show. But you look at it, it's like this team is from top to bottom. This is how you want your organization to be ran. And, I don't think Celtics fans lose sight of that. And I think it's something that they are appreciative because they should be.
All right, Justin. So I need your finals matchup prediction here. Who's coming out of the East? Who's coming out of the West?
I've got the Celtics coming out of the East and the Denver's coming out of the West. I just don't see any team beating Denver. With Nikola Jokic, they are the best team in the West, head and shoulders, and they've been there. So I think that this is really one of the more obvious ones. Obviously, nothing's obvious when you're talking championships, but I think this is a matchup that I think everybody has, right? I think it'd be hard to find some people that have like a different matchup. I'd say like 60% of NBA fans probably have Celtics Nuggets.
Yeah, and I think the NBA might be rooting for that as well. I mean, especially you saw what happened last year when Miami got in, where they really had no business being there. And just like Denver even said, like Michael Porter Jr. was talking about it. He's like, we thought we were getting Boston, and we were kind of almost relieved when it was Miami. And we're like, this is going to be like a cakewalk. So maybe the NBA, wants that to happen and pulls the strings on it. We don't get Tony Brothers, multiple games and series leading up to it to extend series longer than they need to be. So final question for you would be, you got Denver, Boston. We'll have home court. Based on the season, based on what you feel at the Celtics, do you think we come out on top?
I do. I really think this is their year, and I wrote it at my beginning of the year. I wrote it for my big prediction article. I had Celtics over Denver in 6, and I'm going to stick with it.
All right, so I believe that will do it for us on episode 13 of the Dynasty Proud. Justin, thank you again for coming on. Great conversation.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, that will do it.